Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Tiziana Barrow and Gerardo Dada. Tiziana is the founder of Tilagia, a marketing consulting company focused on finding the shortest path to revenue. She has spent the last 20 plus years of her career in the B2B high-tech industry in key positions. And her career has bridged the client and agency sides of the industry, helping to further the marketing goals of businesses ranging in size from startups to global Fortune 100. Passionate about building strategies, innovative campaigns, and the teams that thrive to deliver, she is very much a change agent marketer who finds satisfaction in producing high-quality results. Gerardo has over 20 years of experience in technology, marketing, and has been at the center of the web, mobile, social, and cloud revolutions. He has held senior marketing and strategy positions at SolarWinds, Microsoft, Rackspace, DataCore, Bazaar Voice, and Keeper Security. Today, Gerardo is the CMO at Catchpoint, and he writes on his blog, The Adaptive Marketer. Gerardo, Tiziana, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
Thank you, Brandi. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you guys for joining me. I'm really excited about our topic today, but before we dive into that, I always like to break the ice with a woo-saw moment that I call buzzword banishment. So Tiziana, I will start with you. What buzzword would you like to banish forever?
I don't know that it's so much of a buzzword, but it's definitely something, it's just the way it is. Change agent is like that. It's always for me something that triggers.
Yeah, because if you want to drive change, the way it is doesn't really matter. So we got to do something different. And Gerardo, what about you?
Well, I would normally pick something like digital transformation, but I think that's kind of the Uber buzzword of the decade. But in this case, make it specific about competitive, I will say a kill shit.
Kill shit. I can't say that I've heard that one.
Everybody's looking for that silver bullet, right? That is just gonna make sure it basically kills the competition.
Yes, yeah, and there is no magic bullet. We'd like to think that there is some magic pill or secret sauce that we can, implement and do that's just gonna make everything perfect, and that just doesn't exist. Well, now that we've gotten that off our chest, we can dive in to talk about competitive intelligence today. And this topic came up when I was chatting with some other CMOs, in that there is, there's a difference between competitive intel and competitor obsession. And what some marketers are seeing is, some of their C-suite counterparts, especially CEOs and in tech companies, founders, and even, heads of sales and other departments seem to have this competitor obsession, where they are spending more time looking at what the competitors are doing and asking, why aren't we doing that? And so, we want to help marketers to be able to speak to what's the right balance. How much should you be involved with competitive intel? And so I'm excited to talk to both of you. And as we go into the discussion, I believe in setting intentions. It gives us focus, it gives us purpose, and most important, it gives our audience an understanding of what they should expect from our discussion. So Gerardo, I'll start with you. What would you like the outcome of our conversation to be today?
I think the best outcome when you're talking about competitive is customer value. Because if you're clear about your value to customers, then the competition becomes irrelevant, or at least it's positioned in a way that is not going to be your main focus. Your main focus should be your customers, not your competitors. Sorry, yes. How do you bring value to your customers, not what you do in reaction to your competitors?
Okay, value versus reaction. And what about you, Tiziana?
Well, I hope that from this discussion, people are actually inspired to set up a competitive intelligence function, because it can really help the sales team and coach the sales team in actually getting to speak about the market and the landscape and the product in a very intelligent way.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask you to dig into that a little bit more and tell me, when it comes to competitive intel, what does good look like?
So it's I've been doing competitive intelligence for about 10 years, and definitely it's been a market that has evolved over the years, and it was just a matter of collecting information from market research companies, right? Or available information. Well, right now we have like an overflow and overwhelm of information. And so be able to actually gather all of that and make sense of that is really what makes the difference. And then really be able to kind of extrapolate and how that intelligence is really applied either by sales, by marketing, or by product, for lack of better terms, right? And so it really needs to span and feed the organization across the board. It's not done in silos. And especially like the sales team has an amazing amount of exposure to competitor information. So be able to have that partnerships where they come back to you. I found myself in situations where the sales team will come back to me. It's like, our prospect has given us the competitor slides, and they want you to tell me how my product is different from. So all of a sudden, I found myself in partnership with the sales team.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the key, or what good looks like here, is one, there is a partnership between the different teams, that the information is not only being collected, but that you are able to glean meaningful insight from that. Gerardo, anything you want to add there in terms of what you feel like good looks like?
Yeah, first, I want to agree with Tiziana. Well, there's a danger of being obsessive about competitors. It can be also a rallying point just psychologically, right, about beating competitors. It's actually healthy to some extent. I think it really matters how competitive and how dynamic the market is. Because if you're selling a product that is fairly stable over time, like, I don't know, if you consumer product goods, you probably don't need to spend too much time on competitive analysis, right? You need to understand what the competitor's doing, what is the general trajectory, how they're perceived by the market, and that's it. In software or other alternatives, it becomes a discipline. So it's not only a thing you do, it becomes sometimes a team. And I think about it in three parts. One is, how do you collect competitive information? And that needs to be not only about technology, but who are they hiring? Who are they partnering with? What are they positioning in the market? What kind of companies are they thinking about buying? What are they saying about us in the market? Then the second part is analyzing that. So what do we do about it? What of those things are actionable, and what things we just need to ignore, as much as we don't want to be having always a response to them. And then the third action is, how do you create content and enable the rest of the company, right? So whenever you see competitor X, here's how you respond. And whenever you're in a competitive situation, here are the minefields you need to drop so that they protect you and they establish your value in relative to the competition. Because again, when you drive very significant value to your customers, very differentiated value, the competition becomes irrelevant. Like, if my wife loves her iPhone, and if we go buy a phone and say, like, hey, what about this Sony? Like, no, I want my iPhone. What about this Samsung? And I can tell her anything about the camera or the cost or the app. It doesn't matter. She's already set and she wants an iPhone, right? So Apple has established so much value in the mind of my wife that the competition has become completely irrelevant, sometimes to the extent that they don't even matter. But that's obviously not the case for all of us. Otherwise, business will be so much easier.
No, I really like that. Collect, analyze, and enable. And I think that's a good framework for me to dig in with you all more. So let's talk about that collection. Because if I think about early in my career, competitive intelligence was usually like a folder on a shared drive where we would archive, like you said, if a prospect shared a competitor's slide deck, or there'd be the downloaded product fact sheets, and all those sorts of things would get collected and they'd get saved into one place, and that was our competitive intel. And that was 20-ish years ago. So fast forward, and I do know that there's lots of technology and different things. So give me some best practices if thinking about listeners who may not have a good process around collecting competitive intelligence data. Like, where should they start? What should they be thinking about of how to collect and store and disseminate that information? And I'll let either of you jump in.
I'll let Tiziana start. I was the last one to comment.
So yes, absolutely correct. I mean, there is like tools at the moment that aggregate data for over 12 different platforms, right? So you've got you can actually track a competitor's website. So any updates are actually being tracked, the social channel, the press, and so forth. So you can really determine, and like some of the popular are Compite, which actually got put out by SEMrush, and you've got Clue. Those are the two that I'm really familiar with. But there is market category that is evolving around that data aggregations of what's publicly available out there. And so those tools can feed directly into your Salesforce. And you can kind of, so the sales team or the marketing team can actually have that kind of information being served up. There is still need to go through and really determine what that all really means to us, right? It's like, okay, we see a partnership, but it's there is a partnership between competitor A and company B, right? So so it's definitely like I always want to say, meet your end user wherever they're at. If the platform of choice is Salesforce, I was going to say, just kind of have the information served up there. You can have internal folders and informations. You've got different deliverables in terms of battle cards, product comparison matrix, but they don't need to get all of the product team probably want to see the comparison matrix, and so they'll probably access the folder. But so different customers have got different needs, and so the repository is definitely distributed based on where the customer goes, the internal customers.
Okay. And Gerardo, I'd like you to expand on that. But for those that don't have CI technology in place, what are your thoughts around how they can collect and store this information?
Well, I would say that you need to start with defining one person that needs to own the competitive information, right? That one central person that collects that. In a software company, that will typically be the leader of product marketing. In other organizations, it could be a product manager for a product line, for example. And so that person can organize it in multiple ways and collect all the information and determine what's useful and what is not useful. I would then encourage them to think not only about just collecting data in general, but actually think about what is the right use case or customer profile for each product. Meaning, we would love to say, like, our product is the best. Yeah, but the best for what and for who, right? It's like, is a fork better than a spoon? Well, it depends. Are you going to eat soup or are you going to eat pasta, right?
Right.
And so when you're thinking about competitive intelligence, also when you're talking to customers about it, if you say, look, our product is better because we have these features and the competition doesn't, that doesn't come across like very authentic or very credible. However, you said, like, look, our product is better than open source for certain companies because if your company has a ton of engineering resources and has a discipline of open source and has these characteristics, then yes, open source can be good for you. On the other hand, companies that want something out of the box and want to have support and want to have immediate integrations, etc., they work better with our product. So then you're giving the customer choice do you want X or Y? Like when I was at Rackspace, we would say like, look, do you want support or do you want price? And sometimes, I remember vividly a conversation with a customer that said like, but wait, there's this other company that gives me a better price. And I said, oh, sorry, if you're looking for price, just go look at this other company that is actually cheaper than us and cheaper than the company you're looking at. Have fun. Let me know if you want to talk to. And the customer said like, no, wait, that price is not the most important for me. Like, well, if you really want, in that case, your website to be up and your things to be reliable, then you need to be talking to Rackspace and you need to be willing to spend a little bit extra, right? So that's how you put the information in the context of who's the right customer and what is the right use case. And that helps collect the information and put everything in that same context, so it enriches that and it reinforces and advances your competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I really like that. And it really hits on a point that I see, as a consultant, I'm always helping clients make decisions, whether it's between technologies, between vendors, helping to figure out the right way to go. And, for one person, I always say this could be the exact right solution in this scenario, but the complete wrong solution in another. So I like your soup versus pasta example. And I really like that in using that as the context for collecting competitive intelligence, because I do think about a lot of times it is just like a head-to-head feature set. And it's like, well, oh, we don't have this thing, so like we need to get that thing into the product roadmap, or
exactly,
we do this, so we should just blow the market out. And one of the things that I think about is Bayer is one of the best examples of how someone has pivoted. Bayer could not hold a candle to Tylenol, as offering up, pain relief. But then they found that for that small subset of customers who had heart conditions, they were actually better. And so they stopped trying to just compete with Tylenol on all of the standard things and just started focusing on those people with heart conditions. And so I do think that that kind of thing is where you find that balance of, where they did kind of go from that obsession of trying to chase the market leader to I've got the right intelligence, I understand the use case. So I really like that as the framework for how you're going to collect data is, collect it all, but figure out where it applies and not just have like this repository of all the stuff.
And that's useful beyond just competitive intelligence, because if you have an aggressive sales team, they'll try to sell a fork to somebody who's trying to eat soup, right? And they'll claim success that they beat the spoon company, but that only results in pains for everybody, and the customer's going to be upset, and you're going to get bad reviews, and then you're going to have to refund the money, etc. So it's better just to say like, look, we're not the right company for you.
Right. Awesome. So let's shift a little bit in talking about analyzing. So, being able to take action on the data. So we've got information. And I know, Tiziana, you had hit on the importance of being able to glean insights from that information. And I want to narrow our discussion a little bit, because I know we talked about sales, marketing, product can all use this information differently. Because our audience is head of market or head of marketing, I would definitely like to focus in on, when we've got good competitive intelligence collected, how can marketing best analyze and glean insights from that information for that function?
So I think there is a couple of things that I like to highlight, because, right, so in my case, I've established actually the competitive functions within the marketing department. And if you're trying to establish a category, or if you're playing in an overly populated or competitive scenarios, competitive intelligence is really key. And it's not key necessarily for feature function comparison, but it's really, especially for the marketing department, their go-to-market strategies. How are they going from A to B? What industry are they going after? What personas are they targeting? It's like, are we invited at the table in the discussions that and if not, is it because we are approaching the wrong personas? Is it because we're not using the right media outlets? Is it because we're not regulations, associations? So it kind of really helps you to look at how the market is approaching the problem, and especially when like there is a new market and there is a bunch of startups coming together and they're all coming out of different angles to it. It's fundamental for the for the strategy to really kind of know how you are talking about the market. So it kind of goes all the way at the CEO level, at the head of marketing level, to be able to define the market and how you're going to go to market. So it really feeds the plan, and it is a full-time job.
Okay, and Gerardo, what about you? How do you feel like marketing can best analyze and glean insights from the competitive intelligence information?
So I'll give you another analogy. You're shark, and then you have other sharks next to your competitors, right? Every move they make could be getting closer to where you're fishing or getting away from where you're fishing and just going straight. Right? So every time you get new piece of information, you can decide to ignore it. If they're going in a different direction, it's actually a good thing, right? You don't need to do anything about it. You can watch it. If it's like, I don't know, it looks like it's something that is going to happen, it's going to be an indication of a future move, then you need to keep an eye on that and maybe even do more research about it in some cases. You can be defensive about, well, maybe they're saying this about us. So if you hear that in the market, how do we equip our sellers, or how do we have messages in the market that defend us against these claims, or an educated customer about our point of view? And then the fourth is like acting, right? Like acting could be, we need to develop a feature, we need to change our prices, or sometimes even exiting a market, right? And that acting can be not only in a defensive way, but how do we do something that's better than them? Like a good story that I love is detergents. You wanted to have the cleanest detergent. So many decades ago, companies were fighting to be the cleanest. And then one marketer said, okay, we're going to say we're the whitest, because the color was a kind of a way that people experience cleanliness, right? So the whiter your clothes are, the cleaner they look. So they started on that game on who is the whitest. And then another company said, like, we're going to beat them, and we're going to say our clothes smell the best. So if you think about, Tide or Downy commercials, they take the clothes and they smell them, right? And you can almost smell them yourself in front of the TV, and they smell clean. So they basically are trying to do the same thing, right? Demonstrate who cleans the most. But now they're using different ways of explaining that or communicating that to the customer. They went from just clean to color to smell. And you can do that in almost every market, just finding not only a different position, but a different way to make your value evident for customers in a way that is very experiential.
Yeah, that is a good point, because there are certain things, and I mean, detergent is a great example, because there's only so clean you can get. And so like to a certain degree, it's like competing on clean. At a certain point, it's like, this is fine enough, like it's clean. But when you start competing on smell, that is something where people have a real preference. Like I have a strong preference for Gain, and I can't stand when clothes are washed in Tide. I don't like the Tide smell. So like it's kind of like your wife and the iPhone. Like, during the pandemic when everything was out, it was like, oh, I can buy anything but Tide. So, I don't want to get too deep into my laundry preferences, but it is a great example of how you can start to set yourself apart, because in that case, there are detergents that cater to people who want no smell, or, it's like, so those become things where you start to kind of split the market in a way that you can win. So I like the thought of like an ignore being one of the options, because I think that's sometimes something we don't think about. And I think that's how we lean into obsession, into the obsession territory, is not recognizing that sometimes you should ignore it. Like, Like, that's great for them. Doesn't have anything to do with me.
If I can add something else to your comment about the hygiene, it gives us full circle to the use cases and the customers, because it's critical as a marketer you understand what are the buying factors for each one of your customers and what are the attributes of your product and those of the competition. And when you look at that, there's a categorization. There's factors that are hygienic factors, and it's like the hygiene in a hotel. Nobody, you go to a hotel and how was it your stay? Nobody says like it was super clean, right? Like once you reach a certain level, that need is satisfied, and going beyond that is not going to move the needle. There are other factors that create preference. And there are other factors that have different values in different markets. Like if you're talking about car prices, and for some markets, some buyers care about price, and that might be the most important factor. For some, it's irrelevant, and for some, it's just a secondary factor. Sorry, Tatiana, I'll let you.
No, that's okay. What I wanted to add is, I think when there is competitive obsessions, it actually, I used to call them chicken little calls, right? The sky has fallen, the sky has fallen. And it really actually, what I have found in my experience is that oftentimes the salespeople don't have the confidence that we have that view of the market landscape. And so as marketer, I feel that we have a responsibility to convey that. And I'll give you the example of the GPS, right? So the GPS really gives us that intelligence of how to get from point A to point B in the most efficient way. I mean, you can go side street, you can go highways, there is toll roads and so forth. It actually really just kind of gives you an overall. So I don't always want to discount them, because probably if they are seeing, and your sales force or your CRM should really be, are you consistently losing against this competitor? And what are the factors that you are losing over time? And so, I hear you that there is these customer obsessions, but I also invite, as we continue to partner marketing and sales as two functions that in the past have really not collaborated very easily, that there is a understanding of what the obsession is about and if it's a valid obsession.
And then the last sort of the point 3 that you had given, Gerardo, was around content enablement as your third step. Talk a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think Tatiana hit the nail on the head that you want people to be informed and confident. So the salespeople and everybody like field-facing or customer-facing teams need to have enough information, depending on how competitive their market is and how often they compete or lose against competitors. So they have all the information they need to be effective. And the key is that they need to have all the information, but not necessarily more, because sometimes competitive intelligence, I've seen it where it's just a dump, right? Like, hey, here's like 50 documents of our competitors. Nobody in sales has time to do that. The information needs to be succinct and crisp and something they can understand and communicate clearly, ideally put in context of their overall value proposition. So how you do that enablement and how you give people that confidence is critical. But it also means that it needs to be a priority for sales, right? Sales needs to establish that priority. And especially with sales, it needs to be very clear what is important, what is a must do, and what is just information that is optional. So the team needs to become disciplined about consuming and being trained on competitive information. That needs to be part of the sales enablement training all the time, and also any certification or testing or whatever you have to make sure that your sales is equipped to be ready to face customers.
Awesome. And so my last question I want to have both of you answer, because it is something that has come up multiple times. And I'll start with you, Tiziana, is when you are dealing with a CEO or a founder who is a bit competitor obsessed, as the head of marketing, what advice do you have for them in being able to address that and keep them focused where their attention should be?
In order to influence anyone, you need to be able to hear them out. So, being able to have them really uncover, because oftentimes it's not direct. They're saying to you, it's like, we're constantly losing against, company A. But so really uncover strategically what is the CEO frustration or pain point, and then really kind of address them. So making them feel heard, making sure that you are addressing them and telling them how you're addressing them in your go-to-market and what you're going to change, if any at all. If you're going to be doing testing A to B. So it's just really kind of giving them the confidence that you've heard them and that you're going to be addressing them in some way, shape, or form. I think is going to enable you to strengthen that relationship, because in those situations where the individual is not going to feel heard, or is not going to feel that you don't address what they're bringing to the table, it just kind of actually hurts the relationship over time.
So hear them out is your advice. Seek to understand them. What about you, Gerardo?
Yeah, I think Tiziana is right that listening and make sure they feel listened to is very important. That's something every man needs to learn. The longer you've been married, the more you learn that skill. And what I mean is that you don't always need to ask. Sometimes they're just venting, right? About, hey, our competitors are doing this, and you need to acknowledge that and recognize it. But when they're saying, like, what are we going to do about it? Then there's a couple of things you can do. One is, you can put it in context of other priorities. Like, okay, we can do this, but that means we're going to need to drop B or C. Are you okay with that? And then the CEO normally will say, like, no, you're right. We should continue doing what we're doing. Second option is like, okay, we try to copy them, but are we going to be better, or are we going to be looking bad as a bad follower, right? And that's most often the result of sometimes when you're trying to copy your competitors. And the third option, which is sometimes the most effective, is to think, okay, they're doing this to achieve X. Here's something we can do, offering an alternative. Here's something we can do that is actually better for our customer targets, better for our strategy, for our resources, that will achieve the same or sometimes something better, just in a different approach, right? Because the goal is to achieve something, not just to copy your competitors, but to get to that fish before that other sharks get to that.
Awesome. Well, talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. So in traditional therapy, the therapist will give the client some homework. But here at Revenue Rehab, we like to flip that on its head and ask you to give us some homework. So I always like to walk away with an action item. So I'd like for each of you to give us that one thing, something that our listeners can do relatively easily to help move in the right direction of striking a balance between customer intelligence and customer obsession. So Gerardo, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I don't know if that's easy, but it sounds simple. It's make sure you know clearly who is your customer and what's important for them. Like, that's the foundation of strategy, not only of competitive, not only of marketing, but it's the foundation of strategy. Be super clear about who's your customer and therefore who's not, and what's important for them and what's not.
Awesome. Tiziana?
Yeah, for me, it really comes down to one word, and that is be curious. It's, when you are curious about what's the pain point and how, are you feeling the pain, and what's the impact, once you're able to really uncover what it's at the source, and like what Gerardo was saying, evaluate all of your options in order to kind of make up for that pain point or address that pain point. So be curious and ask lots of questions, and have fun.
Awesome. And for those listening, I know I talked in episode 19 with Christina about voice of customer as one way to really understand your customers. So after you finish this episode, scroll back a few and go to episode 19. Well, I have so enjoyed our discussion for today, but that's our time. And before we go, tell our audience how they can connect with you. So Gerardo, tell us about your blog.
Yeah, it's theadaptivemarketer.com. I haven't written a bit, but you should expect more articles to come out. I'm also somewhat active on Twitter as well, at Gerardo Dada.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, we will put those links in the show notes. And Tiziana, what about you?
Yes, I actually I live on LinkedIn pretty much. It's very easy to get me on Messenger there and or on LinkedIn and on my website, Tilagia.com. Yeah.
Awesome. So we will make sure to put those links in the show notes as well. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I hope that everyone has enjoyed my conversation with Gerardo and Tiziana. I can't believe that we're already at the end. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.